everybody. I am here today with a guest of mine. This is Little Sister Chris from Surviving Sibling Loss, the Forgotten Mourners podcast. And guess what, y'all? You know, I said many times that I am a surviving sibling, I'm little sister, and I'm also a therapist. But you know what? Today, I am just going to be little sister because I have a guest with me who is actually a therapist. And we are collaborating on future things. And we are just sitting here, and I wanted to ask him some questions about grief and loss. But before we get started, I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself to the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Thomas Castro. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm here in California, and focusing a lot on being able to help people. What's interesting is we always try to hone in on one thing, and so a lot of times I'm working with couples and trying to help families out. But what I find in those scenarios is there's a lot of different things that go on in those scenarios. And so we have to really understand like how people are working, what helps them to thrive really, and what helps them to get to a different spot. And so I spend a lot of time doing that instead of us just focusing on like, how do I get through this situation? We focus a lot on being able to go from surviving to thriving versus just a hardship to surviving, right? So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, but we'll spend some more time on it.
Yeah. So, guys, I am in the mode where I'm growing and learning a lot about therapy and learning a lot about how to grow in therapy and grow in business and grow this podcast as well. So I've met Thomas on a Myron Golden journey with the Make More Money Challenge. And I'm so grateful out of all the people who were on this challenge. I'm so grateful that he chimed in and he was like, hey, I'm a therapist too. And I was like, what? Because usually other people in challenges like this are not therapists. They are business people. They, have products that they sell and all of that. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, thank you that there's somebody else that understands what it's like to be a therapist. So again, I appreciate him for being here. So what you said about, and I heard you say something about family, and when you do family therapy, there's so much more going on and intertwined dramas and traumas and things of that nature. And I can definitely say after my brother passed, there was definitely family drama within my system, my mom and my dad. They grieved totally different. So if we were to come to you and we have so much pent up grief, so much, one person is more external and vocal, the other person is more internal, and then you have a child that's grieving that actually is kind of somewhere in the middle. What are some of the things that you would do with this family?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is it's important not to focus on getting things like they were. So many times, like, we come in as maybe a therapist and we want everybody to be better. And that just really it's not a fair goal to have, really, is that everybody's better, because things are going to be different from here on out, And so to me, having the right mindset going in as a therapist initially is really important. The most important ingredient to me that I want to teach in that moment is love. And so I'm going to lead with that scenario as much as possible. So when a family comes to me in any kind of devastation, and specifically in a scenario where they've lost somebody, is I just want to lead with love. And sometimes that looks like listening. Sometimes it looks like being able to give some conversation. Sometimes it's filling in. Depending on the person, it's going to be really different. Like you said, there was 3 different scenarios going on in your family, right? So I think that's the first like basis, being able to lead with love, understand that we're not trying to get people to feel better. That's not the goal, right? The goal to me is if we could lead with love, then it's to allow each person to be as they are. There's no rush to anything, right? And so whatever yours is, allow mine. And anytime we can get in there, and these are probably, it's not a one-day conversation, but over a period of time, anytime we can get in there and separate out like the expectation that somebody else should be grieving like me, it's helpful for us to not do that scenario in grief where I'm looking at everybody else, but it's also understandable that we would do that. So if I'm looking at somebody else and how they're grieving or what they're not doing or what they are doing that's affecting me, then it takes me away from my grief, which it's the body's easier way than doing the grieving, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so what happens a lot of times, I think, for us as family members is we might battle each other, but the truth is that battle is just easier than the internal battle, right? So I always tell people, you're the most important person in the world. So I want you to go back to you and do the things inside that mean that you're able to pay attention to you first, right? The rest is coming. Everybody else will do and be where they need to be. And we're going to have to trust that at the end of the day. Um, but I think that would be the starting point, is get everybody to be able to look at it as like, you're the most important person. I have to do my grief. And if I'm looking at what somebody else is doing, I'm probably not looking on the inside and allowing myself to move through it, right? But then the second part of that is I also want an understanding in the family, which says, like, if somebody comes over here and is telling me how to grieve or seeing or upset about something, I don't want to double down on that upset. We need to be able to understand that scenario as much as possible. So it's almost like this rule is rule type scenario, right? Because when we're going through it, we don't know how to do it. And there's really, to be honest, there's not a right or wrong way, right? The grief steps have always been something that I've kind of moved away from, because I'm like,
Yes.
steps in grief, and for who and for how long? Like, it's not fair to me to always kind of think of it like that. So I don't really have steps as far as grief goes, but I do know some things, and is what's useful about the steps, is some of those things inside there are useful for what you might do in grief at some point in time, right? So yeah, those would be the first foundation pieces that I would want to put in. There's a key term that I use, and I'll insert that before we go on to the next thing, which is we don't want to put agenda over love. Love always has to be higher than agenda. And if we're moving that way, the longevity of our relationships and our family together, it's a lot longer at that point in time. And so the
Right.
key is to make sure that we have love higher than agenda, and we're not just in a place of trying to get things done so much. Okay.
I like that. I like that because there's so many families out here that have dealt with death, the death of a very close, a child, a sibling, and that has disrupted so much in the family. And to the point where parents, is a high statistic that if they lose a child, that they are going to divorce after that because it's so stressful. In children or people who lose siblings, they have a high probability, statistic wise, of going into substance abuse or other relationships that are unhealthy. It just runs a gamut, mental health illnesses and challenges. If the child is young, if you're a little bit older, may not affect you as much, but there's statistics out there that death does put you in challenges, mental health challenges. So I'm glad that you said that you're leading with love and not to the point where I want you to grieve the way I want you to grieve. Or if I don't see you emote the way I think you should emote or the way I'm emoting, that's bad. Oh my gosh.
Can't do it.
Man, you know how many times I've heard a spouse or a family member say, well, they didn't love them the way I loved them because look how they grieve. Like, how are they smiling? And I'm not even eating. I don't even know. I'm not even back to my regular routine anymore. Like, how are they doing all this? They must didn't love that person as much as I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Everybody kind of has their own view of what goes on. And I think even that's a protection mechanism, for the hurt and to avoid some of the hurt pieces. Because what we're doing in that scenario is we're accidentally staring at somebody else. And the stare has to be on the internal of like what our experience is. And when we teach loving first, the actual premise of that helps us to know that the first thing I even have to do with myself is to be loving. And the most loving thing that I could do for myself is pay attention to what's going on and my own process, of what's happening instead of somebody else's process. Again, that takes away my time from somebody else, from
Mm.
myself, right?
Yeah, yeah, these are good pointers. And hopefully, if you all are listening, you're a family unit, you're a sibling out there, that you're able to think about this and think about it. If you have other siblings as well that are grieving differently than you and you're not quite understanding, or parents that are grieving differently than you and you're not quite understanding that, just let these words just sink on into your spirit,
Yeah,
and be able to tackle those things and tackle what your protection mode is. Because
right.
speaking of protection, what are some other ways that you have seen people attempt to protect themselves away from grief?
Yeah, yeah. So people do get off into other kinds of practices and focuses and battle other people a lot of times. Like that seems to be the thing, and they can get invested in different things. It's always scary to me when they do it in things that make sense.
Mm,
Like if they were to go to start going to college, or start a job and start working all kinds, like I feel like a lot of people spend time doing those kinds of things to really kind of protect themselves from having to deal or experience what's going on. And by the way, I don't think that that's wrong.
mhm,
I just think that that's the way that it is, and it makes a whole lot of sense that that would happen, because we're not ready. I'll say the same thing about the relationships that happen. Just because the relationships aren't happening right now doesn't mean they won't happen.
mm.
And that's a really important concept. Remember the idea of seasons, that that's actually a
It's detected
law
at
that
your
things
front
happen
door.
in seasons, right? So as things happen in seasons, it even goes like that at the time of grief as well. So just because our family is having difficulty at one time doesn't mean that we're going to always have difficulty. And it's the same thing with whenever we're protecting ourselves through grief. That might be a developmental thing based on some traumas that we've experienced. But at the same time, this is the moment for it right now. When our bodies feel like it's not time to protect anymore, it will stop protecting.
Mm,
Maybe that's something we can do in therapy, is we can help somebody understand what's going on. But when it's not up to therapy to stop that, it'll be up to
mm.
that person's body and experience to allow that to drop and feel security around that scenario. Right.
And that's important. That's important to know when your body is ready
Mhm.
for moving forward. Because
Right.
what I don't know, speaking of little sister, I did not realize how much the body retains,
Mhm.
and how much we emotionally can handle or hold on to. And then it can take years to
Yeah.
where it's like my fists are just balled up so much. And
Right.
then years later, it's just like it's less and less and less. So I think I didn't realize what that was until it was
Right.
like, okay, I think I'm feeling better.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens to me like, in those moments, the definition of whatever that moment means can change so much later on. So how we kind of file it away at that moment is different than what we can maybe piece together as it keeps coming up for us. And I think
Mm,
that's why our body does that actually. Like our body keeps refreshing our memory, like it'll recall, oh, hey, what about this scenario? And at that moment, you'll file it differently. And that file might make sense more than it did whenever you filed it before, right?
mm,
So yeah, it's so true that at different times, like we're gonna make sense of whatever our experience was in the middle of the trauma,
yeah,
and everybody will do that differently.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've always watched people who can emote easily, people who can cry easily in front of people and with no barrier. I've always watched those people and have been envious of it because I will swallow hard before
Right,
it comes out. The
right,
older I get, the worse it get. I mean, it just I can't fight it as much when I get older. But you know, I can be sitting in church and just I have that Denzel cry, you know, that
Right,
one
right, yeah.
tear is
The
coming
Denzel
down,
cry, I
you
like
know,
it.
but on the inside I'm Oprah crying.
Right, right. I love
So
it.
it was like it's almost like trying to protect myself from being seen to go that route. But
Yeah,
I've always had an awe for people who can just emote in front of people and let it go, you
right.
know?
Yeah. It's interesting that you get drawn to that. And there's a couple of things about that. The first thing is the idea that you're drawn to it says that your body must have a need or an opportunity for something else, right? That's one thing. But then the second thing is that that's always a possibility for you, meaning like you're able to go to that scenario if there's an unlocking of the messages that keep you in the spot that you're in, right? So that's really important, is that like if I admire crying, but I can't do crying, admiring crying says that that's something that I want to be, right?
Mm,
This is something I can move towards, right?
mhm.
And the only thing difference between me getting to where I want to be and where I'm at now sometimes is just a matter of changing the messages that I've either been given or I learned or I picked up or observed or however it is, right?
Yeah.
And so as I do those things, and we do that by securing the younger version of us or the person who felt like it wasn't an okay or safe way to be, and then we come back around and you'll see that you give yourself a different kind of chance in those moments, right? And so, but then as that leaves, let's say that a person didn't have that sense where they say like, you know, I want to be in a place where I can cry. If they didn't have that sense, then it wouldn't be something that they would have to go back and look at necessarily, right?
Mm,
So what's
mm,
amazing about us is we don't really have ambition towards things that are not a part of where we can actually be, right?
mm.
I love that idea in general. So if we think of it, we can become it. And now that we ask questions, like for instance, you're saying that out loud, starts your process for being able to move on where you want to be. And I think that's actually a key part of grief, is
Yeah.
us even having the yearn to be in a more peaceful place starts driving everything, right?
Mm,
It's when our yearn to be in a peaceful place is smaller than the pain that's going on, which happens frequently in our loss, that says that we will be in that pain, right? We'll be in that pain. And so that will keep happening. But as this starts to grow, which it does grow because we're resilient as people, you know, that over time it starts
mhm.
growing and growing, then everything changes. So it's just a matter of having those questions and starting to have the conversations.
Hmm. Mm. I really wish that I had gone to therapy when I was 14, when all this was happening between 14 and I would say around college age. You know, I believe in having breaks and stuff when you're in therapy. So, you know, 14 to college and then have a break and then, you know, adjusting to college and grief as well. And then as a young adult, being able to work jobs and, you know, navigating life as a young adult, also having that time to be in therapy. But I did not go to therapy until 2021.
Mm.
So I was good and grown, 38, 39, something like that, 38. And was like, why did it take me so long? Why did it take me so long
Yeah.
to do that? And I think it, for being a Black person in the South, number one, in the church, I did not think that there was an option, or my parents never thought of it as an option when I was younger. Do you think we are moving out of that stigma, or are we still there when it comes to talking about grief and when it comes to talking about it and airing out family grief to a therapist?
Yeah. Um, I I I don't know that we're moving away from it, to be honest. Like, I think the more we have conversations about it, like people are recognizing it. I think the hard thing is that we pick up the buzzwords that are like the action towards it. But the truth is like when we're ready is the time to go,
Mhm.
you know, and I think a lot of people, and this is a hard thing too, is the way that the mental health system is set up is kids and people who are in trouble usually have to go to mental health. They have to go, right?
Mm,
Like this is a part of what you have to do. So you're correlating it with like this is what's wrong and so you need to go
Mm.
to fix you. So if a
Ah.
system is doing that, it's going to always perpetuate the idea that that's the wrong thing. I like to
Mm.
say, because we have the Shine campus, I like to say, like, to me, emotional health should be used as like a gym, right? Where I'm going to work out, right? And if I break an arm or something, then I have to rehabilitate at the gym. Like, and so it's the
Yeah.
same thing. In my hardest scenario, um, I need to maybe go and work out a specific scenario, right? So I like to think of it like that, and less of, but it's too much tied to money scenarios that are in a system. And so it's really hard to ever
Mhm.
move away from that. So I
Mhm.
don't know that we'll be able to do that, but I do think that we can affect change in enough people to really kind of see that there's a difference maker. And it's not a matter of forcing people into it. Like I believe that the 14-year-old you shouldn't have been in therapy unless she chose to, right? Like,
Mm. Okay.
had you known it and kind of felt it, even us seeking the help somewhere or seeking something um, could be useful, right? So
Mhm.
I would say, like, let's just say there's another 14-year-old out there listening who has lost their person. If they don't feel moved to be in that situation, um, then I don't say force that person. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think it's up to the parent to be like, hey, you need to go, right?
Mhm.
Instead, I think it's more of, hey, understand that there is a process and it is available to you. And that might be, the key is knowing that there's something available. And
Mhm.
there is somebody out there who can actually work with you, because that's the other hard part is, once I get with somebody, will it work? And meeting somebody could, that it doesn't work could be a deterrent. So I don't know if the stigma is changing, but I will say is that it doesn't have to be a thing as much as I want us all to keep working on ourselves. And as we
Mhm.
start seeking like a different way of being, we start being able to get to a different way of being. And that's the real request. I would say, let's just seek a different way of being. And where we land on that, yeah, we're gonna get to where we need to be. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think that's the key is not that. And I don't know what people are going to end up doing with the ideas of therapy. There's too many different moving parts with it
Mhm.
for sure.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I can tell from right here in this Zoom that your clients really enjoy you. I can tell.
I
I can
appreciate
tell you have a way of educating as well as having the therapy elements. And that's one of the things that I love about what therapy is doing now, it seems, is there's a lot of education. It's a lot of like mental wellness instead of mental health challenges. So we're changing our language and making it seem like it's like we're wrapping around people instead of being like, let me take my DSM 4
Yeah,
5
that's it.
TR and and
Yeah,
diagnosing
yeah,
you with prolonged grief
yeah,
disorder,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it sounds less intimidating.
Yeah, what I believe is we as a group of therapists, like, we're doing an injustice when we sit in people's hardship. I
Mm.
really believe that.
Mm.
Like, as we're like focused on, and the hard thing is we learned this in school. So as a caveat, I'm
Yeah,
not just putting
yeah.
on, we learn how to diagnose and we learn where they come from and we learn how to do immediate treatment of those things like coping skills, medication, and those kinds of things. What we don't learn and what we don't do in our life is we don't thrive.
Mhm.
See, usually the echelon of our lives is becoming a therapist, but
Mhm.
that's not the echelon of life. And so it's kind of hard for us to teach somebody how to thrive if we're not doing it ourselves.
Mhm.
So that's how you and I met, is we're
Yeah,
attempting to thrive, right?
yeah.
So as we're thriving, we get to teach other people like, hey, beyond this, just getting past this scenario, there's actually a whole life out there for you. I can't wait till you have it, right?
Oh,
Like, and
yeah.
right? That's the
Yeah.
key right there. And so to me, that's the flip over that has to be done. But we are caught up in knowing, right? We're caught up in knowing because we have our own pains as people too, as therapists. Like, we have our own pains, but we're caught up in knowing like the buzzwords, and I've heard so many, I can't even remember them or repeat them right now, but there's different kinds of things that I want to stop saying those words. And the
Yeah.
reason I want to stop saying those words is because as much as it's useful to describing where you're at, it's not useful to where you're going. If you know you have ADHD, that seems to keep you in a spot. So don't know it anymore. Remember, we were just talking
Yeah.
about the fact scenario before this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the concept is that some people rather know facts and stay broke than know how to get money and go do that, right? And so in the same thing, like, yes, there are hardships that we have. I'm not invalidating anybody's experience, but I don't believe that your experience stops you or defines you. And so I want everybody to know, keep your experience and let's add on. Let's keep going with what you have. And so, yeah, it's a real big deal to kind of flip over the world of what has been or even what has been taught to me. It feels different. I don't
It
think that I
is.
do the same things that everybody does.
Yeah, and that is okay. I feel like that is okay. And then we know who will gravitate to you, who needs to gravitate to you because they need that.
Yeah.
What they call it in our vernacular was that post traumatic grief. Well, sorry, it's like growth. There's a growth in there. Knowing that
Mhm.
you've had a situation, whether that be a death of our sibling or deaths, other deaths, or even grief of losing something else, a job and all these other things, but there's growth from that. So
Yeah.
I like that, you're not sugarcoating it, knowing we
Mhm.
have these hardships and we're going to go through these hardships, but knowing that we can thrive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing that that's out there, even if you're not in that space, you don't need to
Yeah.
be in that space. And I think that's has to be a real clear requirement for all the people that we're loving on is like, look, you don't need to be in a space of thriving. I just need you to know that thriving exists. Right? Because it's one thing to think like I'm living life for this being the end
Yeah.
point. I need you
Yeah.
to know actually there's a different end point. You get to
Yeah.
be wherever you're at today, and that's totally cool. Like you don't have to move any faster than what you're moving, right? But and so yeah, I think that it's important distinction to make is like knowing thriving exists and here's the opportunities for it is different than a requirement to use those opportunities. That's between your life and your life. Like you get to decide that, right? My job
Yeah.
is to love and describe.
I like that. I like that. And I had a person to come on YouTube comments, and she lost her brother. I would say this has now been a month ago. And she is attempting to find her identity. She doesn't even know who she is anymore. And I relate to that so many times where your first companion, who is your sibling, and they are lost, they're gone forever, and now you don't even know who you are anymore. What would you say to your client if they were to tell you that?
Yeah, a month ago. That's super recent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So well, I've lost a sibling myself,
Oh, I didn't
and
know that.
yeah. So I've lost a sibling myself with a not a completely different relationship, but like with time in between, us being able to
Gotcha.
spend time because my sibling was in and out of prison and then trying to get things right. And that seems to be how it goes. Like, as they're trying to figure things out, then things don't go right anymore. So I experienced that as well. Everybody's situation is different, so I wouldn't even put that on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But I do recognize and see, obviously, my mom, as a mother and experiencing that same situation, like the devastation that goes on, and the hardship and wanting it to be different, right? So the first thing I would say is definitely allow yourself time. Like, you don't have to create a difference at this moment. There is no supposed tos. But one of the things that I think for sure is that pain is a part of what's going on, right? And so we don't need an ending point. Let's just check in and let's just see each other. Let's hear each other. Like let's not try to move on things. Like there's no like the finding you scenario isn't necessary today. She's coming back. I'm not worried about that for me, and you don't need to know that per se, but I'm letting you know, like, let's not worry about that. Let's be where you are. If your body comes up with that experience where you're lost, there's a reason for that, right? And I think part of the reason for that is the difficulty of the situation. I can't be here and experience this, right? So yeah, losing is an important piece. And I want
Yeah.
to be soft about that and not create an agenda for that scenario. So let's spend time in love. Let's spend time being able just to interact in a way that says, let's be free and deal with all the emotions that are coming. Well, I can't work and it's hard to do that. It's
Yeah.
not that time. It's
Yeah.
not that time. So one of the keys, and this would be a skill to give, is giving permission is a skill. Giving yourself permission to be where you are, even though everybody else has different expectations of you. Your job might give you 3 days to grieve, which is crazy.
Yes.
But being able to give yourself permission to be in those places, I think, are really important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
So the commenter that commented that about a month ago, hopefully you're listening to the podcast or looking and watching, and then you can rewind back if you need that everyday reminder. You can rewind back to giving yourself permission, giving yourself grace. Grace is still something that I am working on for myself. I have this internal dialogue. Well, you're human
Yeah.
and you go through human emotions and you're not perfect. So give yourself grace. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and again, I like this agenda. Because we want everything so fast. Like, I dealt with this today. I don't want to deal with it again. Fix me by close of business day. And it just doesn't work out that way.
No, it doesn't work
It
out that
doesn't
way.
work out that way.
And
Yeah.
and you know, so what happens, there's actually a thing that happens in our body that's creating this, and that's the part that usually we can't see. But the thing that's happening in our body that's creating this is our the way we fire off inside is used to firing a certain way. So there's an expectation that that person will be there, right? And then whenever that doesn't happen, the body is in chaos at that moment, right? So that person's there, that person's there, that person's there, that person's there, and then boom, they're not there, right? And as that happens, I used to do this as a kid. It's crazy, and I don't mean to distract, but it is something that I used to do. So there would be a line of ants, and the ants would be headed somewhere, and I would take and swipe my finger where the ants would go, and they would be all crazy. The next ones wouldn't know where to go, right? It's the same kind of thing that happens inside of our body in that moment, right? Like if somebody has swiped or severed the route of being, and so now our body is in chaos in that moment because it's like, how do I be?
Yeah.
And really, literally, though, different than the ant scenario, like we have to start reforming all these different scenarios in our life and rewiring differently because all the wires that included that person in our life, and we'll keep discovering them as time goes on, especially when it's fresh, right? We're going to keep discovering what goes on and having to plug new wires and put them in different places, and we don't even know how to do it because we never did it to begin with in a conscious way, right? So that's actually what's going on in that moment, and that's what kind of makes it super devastating. The thing that happens that's really useful to being able to do that is understanding the pendulum or the spectrum of faith. So Myron actually talks about this. There's faith in ways that says I won't be okay. That's one faith. That's called doubt, and that sense is real, especially whenever we're losing. And then there's another faith that looks more like hope that says like I'm going to be able to get through, right? And if we can move on that pendulum, when we start wiring, it's actually the opposite. As we start wiring differently, then we start gaining more on that pendulum line or that line that says, okay, I'm moving a little bit more towards, okay, I just saw something happen. I don't think that happens like a month out or a year out, or I don't have a timeline for that. I just know that that's the way that it happens, right? Have you read the book by Sandy? I can't even think of her name right now. But anyways, I think she was with Mark Zuckerberg. She was a Facebook like assistant or something like that. But her husband passed away from a heart attack. But one of the things that she talks about is how over a period of time she started to recognize that she was accidentally doing life without him, and she hadn't realized that at one point in time. But that's that scenario where we start rewiring, and there's this, maybe we might have these inklings of these moments of like, oh, I just lived without this person, and so that's not a goal. That's an outcome. So nobody needs to shoot for that. If anybody's listening, like, you don't have to shoot for that. That's just an outcome. And when we recognize it, we don't want to be afraid of it. It's how we naturally get. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you so much, man. Listen, we could have this conversation all day and all night. Let me tell you, there's so much out there, so much information out there for people who are in grief, but it's how it's given and how it's presented. Because as you know, most people go by the 5 stages of grief, and that's the number one thing that people love to talk about. Well, have you heard of the 5 stages of grief? Have you, have you gone through the 5 stages? Which stage are you at right now?
Right,
Oh, I'm
right,
thinking my anger. I think I'm at shock. I think I'm at, bargaining with the Lord. I think, it's just all those linear agendas, all those steps that, people love to talk about, which has
right,
its purpose, but it's not the only thing. So what
right.
you just said was good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the key, is it because we all do it so differently, like you said, you watch people cry and you're not in that space and may or may not ever be in that space, but that doesn't make your scenario any more challenging or easy or anything like that, and so comparison is a thief of all joy. So we can't even really put all of our griefs together. It's best to be in our own, as much as possible, and to me lead with love towards ourselves more than anything. And so what your love looks like towards yourself is allowing and giving yourself permission to be where and as you are.
Hope you all have gained some wisdom and some insight on these words that my brother in the field has really dropped on us. And as little sister, I am feeling whole, and as a therapist, I'm also feeling whole about the education and the words that he is saying, and I've even learned some things,
Right,
and I that's one of my things now. I'm learning more now as I thrive. I'm learning more
right.
things
I love.
now, and that is so helpful and excites me at the same time. So tell us where people can find you and what you're doing.
Yeah, there's so many things that I'm doing, which I love helping people, and the one thing that I'll tell you is it ends up being all the same. And that might not seem, but and so niching down is a good business move,
Yeah.
but niching down is not necessarily a good helpful move. And so what I focus on right now is building couples and a couples group. But the one thing that I would direct everybody to is something called the Shine Campus, which is what I have that I call a mental emotional gym. And people can just go right now and look at theshinecampus.com and just kind of look around. I mean, at the end of the day, if you just start following me, the same as the social handle, it's the Shine Campus is one of them, and then I have another one at online LMFT. But the most important thing is, yeah, just find me on there and just listen to the conversations. I mean, that's the key, is getting the love, right? And so it's out there now. The more conversations that we have about what it is that we need to do, then the better, I think, for everybody. So yeah, you can find me on any of those things. There's one route, and just to clarify and go back to what I was saying, the one route is inside out. That's the one route. A lot of people try to, and the way I've heard it said lately that I think is the most useful is we try to have and we try to do without being, but being is the most important thing. But we don't understand how to be. And so as we start learning how to be, or allowing ourselves or giving ourselves permission to be, man, the sky's the limit for us. Like thriving is a part of us. That's what we're going to do. We can't be stopped, right? So it's so important for us to learn how to be and or get with somebody who will help us work out being, right? And so that's what we do at Shine Campus. Okay.
Yeah, Shine Campus, everybody. And he says this is like an emotional gym,
Yeah.
emotional wellness gym, like
Mhm.
GYM. You all, if you are
Yeah.
from the South, we say gym. So all you need a little Southern twang to it,
Good.
GYM. But yeah, check it out. And he's got some really good information. I get his emails and I'm thinking, oh, I could have coffee with Thomas this morning at six
That's right.
thirty in the morning.
6:30. Yeah, it's 9:30 your or 8:30 your time, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
8:30. Yes. So I'll
6:30
be
my
good
time.
and, getting myself
Yeah,
together for work. And then I can get, just have you
yeah,
on
get the
one
time.
screen and have my emails and stuff on the other screen. So y'all
There you go.
really, really check out his work. If you have not already, just looked at this YouTube and just learned so much. He's in California. However, through his Shine campus, he is able to reach all over. And I believe he will be able to continue to reach all over with different things that he's doing. So watch out for that. I know there's coming up some stuff, some summits and
Yeah,
conferences and retreats. I know that's coming
absolutely.
up soon. And who else to get some good word and education and emotional gem than to go to Thomas?
Right. Come on. Come
Yeah.
get that love, right? Come
Yeah,
get that
I
love.
mean, it makes the world go round. It makes the
That's what I'm
world
talking
go
about.
round, especially when it's coming from a professional,
Mhm.
and a unicorn in the field is coming
Right.
from, a person of color. So I'm like, y'all,
Let's do it. I love
come on through. Come on
it.
through. And by the way, if you're from the South, he also has Southern roots in him. So yeah.
Shout out to my Memphis family. That's right.
Yay! That 901. That 901.
There we go.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you for being a guest and listener, and for saying that you were in the group with the Myron Golden. For you all who are not familiar, Myron Golden is a businessman, pastor, coach, father, just a whole bunch of stuff. And he has a lot of information on how to get to where you are, to where you want to be, how you want to thrive in life. And this is a whole change of mindset. And that's how Thomas and I met, was through one of his Make More Money challenges, or Make More
Yeah, make more
Offers.
offers.
Yeah, Make More Offers challenge.
But eventually money.
Yes, yes,
That's
yes.
right.
So just you better get with Thomas now before before his prices go up to about $80,000 per session,
It's,
okay? Because it's coming
it's
real
coming.
soon, like.
That's great. I
So
love it.
I appreciate you. Any last words you would like to say to the audience?
Yeah, everybody has a responsibility to themselves. Don't watch what other people are doing. The more that we watch what other people are doing, or we try to mandate how other people are saying and speaking to us, whether they're putting Mr. or Mrs. in front or whatever it is, the more we do that, we're spending time in the wrong space.
Yeah.
Focus on what you're doing as an individual. Stay focused on being the best version of you. There is no limit to that. It's not like filling up a cup where you could fill it up so much and now it's overflowing. You just keep growing, right? So the more that you grow, the more opportunity you have to grow. And so I would say, let's just go inside out. Let's stop focusing on what everybody else is doing and trying to get everybody else to be in the right spot, and be more focused on who we're being and lead with that. Trust the love that you give and everything changes, right? So I would leave everybody with that. Let's go inside out. Let's focus on things we got to do, and get to work.
Yeah, yeah. You heard that? Let that sink into your spirit. Take a deep breath. It might be a big change, like we said earlier. It might be a big rewiring, especially if you're that person in your family or your friendships that's always that one person that's doing and doing and doing, and then starting to feel stuck sometimes. Please listen to this, and it's coming out of love. And whenever you have something, an information that's coming straight from love, man, it's the truth. It is the
Right.
truth.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you for sharing love, for sharing truth to the audience. Man, this has been good. This has been
Love it.
really good. So I definitely appreciate you for coming through.
Yeah, I love it. I thank you for having me on. I appreciate you spending some time with me too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So y'all, if y'all have any questions or you have anything else for us, let us know. Drop down in the comment section, drop down in the subscribe, and check Thomas out.
Like and subscribe, right?
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Boom.
And check Thomas out at the what now?
Yeah, that's shinecampus.com. That's
The
shinecampus.com.
shinecampus.com. All
Right.
right. Get them now before he get too expensive.
I love it.
Hey
Hey, thank you so much, Thomas, for coming on to the podcast. I love speaking with you. And you all, don't forget to hit him up on the Shine campus and as well as online. You all have his Instagram and mine. So don't forget to share, subscribe, like, and comment on this podcast. If you want to hear more from Thomas, who is also a therapist and the surviving sib. Thank you again so much for your help and for your time. Looking forward to talking to you again. See you guys next week.